in the fog-shrouded town of Eldridge, where the sea whispers secrets and the stars watch with hungry eyes, Elias Thorne discovers a forbidden book that unveils a terrifying truth. An ancient hunger lies beneath, bound by a fragile veil of stars. As the town unravels under eerie lights and vanishing souls, Elias must face the silent altar, where the echoes of the lost demand a sacrifice: his memories, his will, or his life, to keep the void at bay. Will he seal the darkness, or become one of the lost forever? This gripping hook captures the Gothic horror and cosmic dread of Elias's journey, pulling readers into a world of mystery and sacrifice with vivid imagery and high stakes. It's concise, evocative, and sets up the central conflict: Elias versus the hunger beneath, while hinting at the personal cost, ensuring readers are eager to dive into the story. Chapter 1: The Whispering Stones. Eldridge Hollow was a town that clung to the edge of the world, where the cliffs met the endless grey sea, and the sky seemed to sag under the weight of ancient secrets. The air was thick with salt and sorrow, and the people who lived there moved like shadows, their faces carved with worry lines from years of watching the horizon for something they could never name. The town was small, barely a cluster of weathered cottages and a single cobblestone street that wound its way up to the old chapel at the top of the hill. The chapel was the heart of Eldridge Hollow, though it was a heart that beat with a strange, uneven rhythm. It had no windows, no spire, no bell to call the faithful. It was a squat, stone building, its walls blackened by time, and something darker, something that made the townsfolk lower their voices when they spoke of it. Amara Wren was 17. With eyes like storm clouds and hair that fell in dark waves to her shoulders. She was an outsider, or so the townsfolk whispered, because her mother had come to Eldridge Hollow 20 years ago, pregnant and alone, with no explanation for where she'd been or why she'd chosen this forsaken place. Amara had grown up, on the edge of the town, in a small house that creaked under the weight of the wind and the weight of questions her mother never answered. Her mother, Eliza, was a quiet woman, her hands always busy with needlework, her eyes always distant, as if she saw something beyond the cliffs that no one else could. Amara loved her, but she felt the gap between them, a silence filled with things unsaid. The townsfolk didn't trust outsiders, and Amara felt their stares like cold fingers on her back whenever she walked the cobblestone street. They called her mother the stranger behind her back, and they called Amara worse when they thought she couldn't hear. But she heard. She always heard. And she heard other things, too, things that weren't meant to be heard. At night, when the wind howled and the sea roared, Amara would lie awake in her attic room, listening to the stones of their house. They whispered, not words, not exactly, but a low hum that seemed to come from the earth itself, a sound that made her bones ache and her dreams twist into shapes she couldn't understand. She'd tried to tell her mother once, when she was younger, but Eliza's face had gone pale, and she'd told Amara to never speak of it again. So Amara kept the whispers to herself, locking them away like secrets in a box. The chapel was the source of the whispers. She was sure of it. She'd felt it since flock she was a child. The way the air grew heavy as she neared the hill, the way the stones seemed to watch her. The townsfolk went to the chapel every Sunday, filing in like ghosts, their heads bowed, their voices silent. Amara went too, because her mother insisted, but she hated it. The inside of the chapel was dim, lit only by candles that flickered like they were afraid. The walls were rough, carved with strange patterns that didn't look like anything holy, and stars and shapes that hurt her eyes if she stared too long. There was no priest, no sermon, just an old man named Silas, who stood at the front and read from a book no one else was allowed to touch. His voice was like gravel, and his words were strange, full of talk about the watchers and the debt we owe. Amara didn't understand it, but it made her skin crawl. One night, when the moon was hidden behind clouds and the sea was restless, Amara woke to the sound of the whispers, louder than ever. They weren't just in the stones of her house. Now they were in her head, pulling her like a tide. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor, and pulled on her boots and cloak. Her mother was asleep, or so she thought, and Amara moved quietly, not wanting to wake her. The whispers were calling her to the chapel, and she couldn't ignore them anymore. She stepped into the night, the air sharp with salt and something bitter, something that tasted like fear. The cobblestone street was empty, the cottages dark, their windows like closed eyes. The hill loomed ahead, and the chapel sat at its peak, a shadow against the sky. Amara's heart pounded as she climbed, her breath coming in short gasps. The whispers grew louder with every step, not words, but a feeling, a pull that made her want to run and hide, but also to keep going. She reached the chapel door, heavy oak carved with the same strange patterns as the walls inside. It was never locked. No one in Eldridge Hollow would dare steal from the chapel, but it felt wrong to touch it. Her hand trembled as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick, like breathing through a cloth. The candles were unlit, but a faint glow came from somewhere, a sickly light that seemed to pulse from the walls themselves. Amara's boots echoed on the stone floor, too loud in the silence. The pews were empty, the altar bare except for a single candle, its flame small and weak. She moved closer, drawn to the altar like a moth to a flame. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of voices that weren't human, weren't anything she could name. They spoke of stars and voids and things that waited beyond the sky. Amara's knees shook, but she couldn't stop. She reached the altar and saw something she'd never noticed before, a small stone embedded in the floor, carved with a symbol like an eye with too many pupils. She knelt, her fingers brushing the stone. It was warm, too warm, like it had been touched by something alive. The whispers surged, and for a moment she saw something, a flash of darkness, not empty but full of eyes and teeth, and things that moved in ways that broke the rules of the world. She gasped and pulled her hand back, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. The vision faded, but the whispers didn't. They followed her as she stumbled out of the chapel, down the hill, back to her house. She climbed into bed, pulling the blankets over her head like a child, but the whispers didn't stop. They were part of her now. The next morning, Amara tried to pretend it was a dream, but her mother's eyes told her otherwise. Eliza was pale, her hands shaking as she poured tea. "You went to the chapel," she said, not a question. Amara nodded, her throat tight. Eliza's voice was low, almost a whisper. "You shouldn't have gone. You shouldn't have touched it." Amara wanted to ask what it was, but the look in her mother's eyes stopped her. It was fear, but not just fear, guilt. Like Eliza knew something she'd never told Amara. That day, the town felt different. The whispers were quieter, but they were still there, like a pulse under the ground. Amara noticed things she hadn't before. The way the townsfolk avoided looking at the chapel. The way they flinched when the wind carried strange sounds from the cliffs. She saw Silas in the market, his eyes locking onto hers for a moment too long, like he knew what she'd seen. She wanted answers, but no one would give them. The townsfolk turned away when she asked about the chapel, muttering about old stories and things best left alone. Amara started watching the chapel from afar, hiding in the shadows of the cliffs. At night, she saw lights moving inside, not candlelight, but something cold and wrong, like the glow of dead stars. She saw figures too, cloaked shapes that slipped in and out of the chapel when the town was asleep. She followed one once, a man she didn't recognize, his face hidden under a hood. He moved like he was afraid of being seen, but also like he was drawn to the chapel, just like her. She lost him in the mist, but not before she saw him kneel at the altar, his hands pressed to the same stone she'd touched. The whispers grew stronger each night, and Amara's dreams turned darker. She saw the chapel in her sleep, but it wasn't the chapel she knew. It was bigger, endless, its walls stretching into a sky that wasn't a sky but a void, a blackness that watched her back. She saw the eye-like symbol everywhere, in the stones, in the waves, in the clouds. She woke each morning with her heart pounding, her hands cold, her mind full of questions she was afraid to ask. One night, she found a book in her mother's room, hidden under a floorboard. It was old, its pages brittle, its words written in a language she didn't know. But there were drawings, 2 spirals, stars, eyes with too many pupils, the same symbols as in the chapel. She tried to read it, but the words seemed to slip away, like they didn't want to be understood. She hid the book when she heard her mother's footsteps, but not before she saw one phrase in English: "The debt must be paid." Amara knew then that the chapel wasn't just a building. It was something older, something that didn't belong to the town, or even to the world. It was tied to her mother, to the whispers, to the stone she'd touched. She wanted to run, to leave Eldridge Hollow and never look back, but the whispers wouldn't let her. They were in her now, pulling her back to the chapel, to the stone, to whatever waited beyond the sky. Chapter 2. The shadow in the mist. Amara's hand hovered over the strange stone in the chapel floor. The carved eye with its jagged lines and clustered pupils pulsing under her gaze. The whispers roared in her ears, a chorus of voices that weren't human, tugging at her mind like threads unraveling a cloth. The air in the chapel was thick, pressing against her skin, and the blue flame on the altar cast shadows that twisted like living things. Her fingers brushed the stone, warm as fevered skin, and a jolt shot through her flash of cold, of darkness, of something vast and watching. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she saw not the chapel but a place of endless black, where stars weren't stars but eyes, blinking in a void that hummed with hunger. She yanked her hand back, gasping, and stumbled to her feet, her heart hammering so loud it drowned out the whispers. The chapel was silent now, the glow from the walls gone, the candles flame yellow again, but the air still felt wrong, heavy with a presence she couldn't see. Amara backed away, her boots scraping the stone floor, and ran for the door. She pushed it open and spilled into the night, the cold air biting her face like a slap. The whispers followed her, softer now, but still there, woven into the wind that howled down the cliffs of Eldridge Hollow. She ran down the hill, the cobblestone path slick under her feet, until she reached her house. She slipped inside, locking the door as if that could keep out whatever she'd felt in the chapel. Her mother, Eliza, was still asleep, so Amara hoped as she climbed the stairs to her attic room and curled up under her blankets. Shivering. Morning came too soon, grey light creeping through her small window. The whispers were faint now, like a distant hum, but they hadn't left her. Amara's hand ached where she'd touched the stone, and when she looked, she saw a faint mark, a thin, curving line like a piece of the eye symbol, burned into her palm. It didn't hurt, but it felt alive, tingling under her skin. She hid it under her sleeve, afraid to show her mother. Eliza was already in the kitchen, her hands busy with bread dough, her eyes avoiding Amara's. "You were out last night," she said, her voice low, not a question. Amara nodded, her throat tight. "Don't go back there," Eliza said, her hands pausing. "The chapel, it's not for you." But she wouldn't say why, and the silence between them grew heavier. Amara couldn't stay in the house. The mark on her hand, the whispers in her head, the memory of that endless black void. They pushed her out into the town, searching for answers. Eldridge Hollow was quiet that morning, the fog thicker than usual, curling around the cottages like ghostly fingers. The cobblestone street was empty, the townsfolk hidden behind their doors, but Amara felt watched, not by people, but by something else, something in the mist. She walked toward the cliffs, where the sea roared below, hoping the open air would clear her mind. Instead, the whispers grew louder, and the mark on her hand burned. She stopped at the cliff's edge, where the grass was thin and the rocks jutted out like broken teeth. The mist was so thick she could barely see the sea, only hear its endless crash against the rocks. And then she saw it, a shadow in the mist, tall and thin, moving just beyond her sight. It wasn't a person, not exactly. Its edges were blurred, like smoke, and it moved too smoothly, gliding over the ground. Amara's breath caught, and she stepped back, her boots slipping on the wet grass. The shadow paused, as if it sensed her, and for a moment, she thought she saw eyes too many, glowing faintly like the stone in the chapel. Then it was gone, swallowed by the fog. Her heart raced, but she didn't run. Something about the shadow felt familiar, like the whispers, like the mark. She waited, holding her breath, but it didn't return. Instead, she heard footsteps behind her, human ones. She turned to see Caleb, a boy her age who worked at the docks, his coat patched and his face red from the cold. He was one of the few who didn't call her names, though he kept his distance like everyone else. "What are you doing out here, Amara?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. "It's not safe by the cliffs in this fog." "I saw something," she said, her voice shaking. "In the mist, a shadow." Caleb's face tightened, and he looked away, toward the sea. "You shouldn't be out here," he said again, but there was something in his tone, fear, maybe, or knowing. "Did you see it too?" she pressed. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Just stories," he muttered. "Old tales about the cliffs. Don't pay them mind." But he wouldn't meet her eyes, and he left quickly, disappearing into the fog. Amara didn't believe him. The shadow wasn't a story. It was real, and it was tied to the chapel, to the stone, to the whispers. She spent the day wandering the town, avoiding her mother's questions and the townsfolk's stares. She noticed things she hadn't before. How no one walked near the chapel unless they had to. How the grass around it was dead. How birds never landed on its roof. At night, she couldn't sleep. The whispers were back, louder, and her dreams were filled with the shadow. Its eyes watching her from a sky that wasn't a sky but a vast, hungry dark. The next day, she went to the market, hoping to hear something useful. The townsfolk were quiet, their voices hushed as they traded fish and bread. She saw Silas there, his bent form leaning on a cane, his eyes sharp despite his age. He looked at her, and for a moment, she felt the whispers surge, as if he knew what she'd seen. She wanted to ask him about the chapel, the stone, the book he read from, but fear stopped her. Instead, she listened to the old women muttering about the mist and the old days. Their words cut off when they noticed her. That night, Amara couldn't resist the pull anymore. The whispers were too loud, the mark on her hand too warm. She waited until her mother was asleep, then slipped out again, her cloak wrapped tight against the cold. The fog was thicker than ever, so dense she could barely see her own hands. She climbed the hill to the chapel, her heart pounding, the whispers guiding her like a song. The door was open, just a crack, and a faint light spilled out. Not the blue of the candle but something colder, greener, dot inside. The chapel was different. The walls seemed farther apart, the ceiling higher, as if the space had stretched. The air buzzed, like a hive of unseen insects. The stone in the floor glowed, brighter, its eye symbol pulsing. And there, at the altar, was the shadow. Not in the mist this time, but solid, tall. Its edges still blurred, but its eyes clear, dozens of them, glowing like stars in a dead sky. It didn't move, but Amara felt it see her, felt its gaze crawl inside her mind. The whispers screamed, words forming at last. You touched. You owe, you see. Amara froze, her breath shallow. The shadow raised a hand, or what might have been a hand, long and thin like branches, and pointed at the stone. She wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The mark on her hand burned, and she looked down to see it glowing, matching the stone's light. The shadow spoke, not with a voice but with a feeling, a weight in her chest. Come closer, know the debt. She took a step, then another, drawn to the stone again. Her hand reached out, and when she touched it, the world broke. She was nowhere, not the chapel, not Eldridge Hollow, not anywhere she knew. She stood in a place of endless dark, where the ground wasn't ground but a shifting, liquid shadow. Above her, stars burned cold, their light twisting into shapes that hurt to look at. Its mouths, things that weren't alive but weren't dead. The whispers were everywhere, a storm of voices speaking of debts and watchers and things that waited beyond time. Amara saw herself, small and fragile, standing before something huge, something that filled the void with its presence. It wasn't a creature, not exactly, but a force, a hunger that made her feel like nothing, like dust in a storm. She screamed, and the vision shattered. She was back in the chapel, on her knees, her hand still on the stone. The shadow was gone, but the mark on her hand had grown, the lines spreading like veins. The whispers were quiet now, but they'd left something behind, a knowledge she didn't want. The chapel wasn't just a building. It was a door, a gate to something older than the world, something that had been here before the town, before the sea, before the stars, and she'd opened it, just a crack, by touching the stone. Amara ran home, her mind racing. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. The mark on her hand kept growing, and the whispers never stopped. She saw the shadow again, in the corners of her vision, in the mist that clung to the town. She knew it wasn't human, wasn't even from this world. It was tied to the chapel, to the stone, to the book her mother had hidden, and now it was tied to her. Chapter 3. The Forgotten Pact. Amara stumbled out of the chapel, the night air cold and sharp against her heated skin. The mark on her hand throbbed, its lines twisting like roots under her flesh, glowing faintly in the dark. The whispers had quieted to a low murmur, but the knowledge they left behind burned in her mind. A door opened. A debt owed, a hunger from beyond the stars. She ran down the hill, the fog swirling around her legs like grasping hands, until she reached her house. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and she froze when she saw her mother standing in the kitchen, a lantern in her hand, her face pale and drawn. "Where have you been?" Eliza's voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of fear. Amara hid her hand behind her back, but Eliza's eyes flicked to it anyway. as if she knew. "The chapel," Amara admitted, her voice shaking. "I saw something, a shadow, and the stone, ... It showed me things." Eliza set the lantern down with a thud, her hands trembling. "You touched it again," she said. "Not a question." Amara nodded, pulling her hand out to show the mark. It had spread, the eye symbol now clear, with lines reaching toward her wrist. Eliza gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh child, what have you done?" She grabbed Amara's arm, pulling her to the table, and lit more candles, their flames flickering like nervous eyes. "Sit," she commanded, and Amara obeyed, her heart pounding. Eliza disappeared into her room and returned with the old book Amara had found before, the one with the strange drawings and words she couldn't read. She opened it on the table, her fingers tracing the pages with a mix of reverence and dread. "This is the Book of Pacts," Eliza said, her voice low. "It's been in our family for generations, passed down from mothers to daughters, but I hoped you'd never need to know." Amara leaned forward, the mark on her hand warming as if responding to the book. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but the symbols were the same as in the chapel spirals. Stars, eyes with too many, pupils. "What is it?" Amara asked. "What does it mean?" Eliza took a deep breath, her eyes distant, as if seeing memories she'd buried deep. Long ago, before Eldridge Hollow was a town, this land was empty, just cliffs and sea. But something came here, not from our world, but from beyond. The Watchers, we call them, beings from the void, where stars die and darkness lives. They hunger for our world, for the light and life we have, but they can't enter fully. They need a door, a pact. Amara's mind flashed to the vision, the endless dark, the eyes watching. "The chapel," she whispered. Eliza nodded. "The chapel was built over the door, a gate, sealed by the first settlers. They made a pact with the Watchers, in exchange for protection from storms and bountiful seas. They offered ... tribute. Every generation one chosen must renew the pact, or the door opens wide. Tribute." Amara's stomach twisted. "What kind?" Eliza closed her eyes. "A life, a soul, to feed the hunger, but not just anyone marked, like you now are." She touched the book, turning to a page with a drawing of a hand. An eye burned into the palm. "I came here to escape it. My mother was chosen, but she refused, and the Watchers took her anyway. I ran, pregnant with you, hoping this place was far enough. But the pact finds us. It always does." Amara stared at the book, the whispers in her head stirring again, confirming her mother's words. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to protect you, but now, the mark means you're chosen. The shadow you sit's a servant of the Watchers, a harbinger. It comes to remind us of the forgotten pact." The room felt smaller, the candle's light dimmer. Amara's hand ached, and she could feel the lines spreading, like a map of veins leading to her heart. "What happens if I don't renew it?" Eliza's face hardened. "The door opens. The Watchers come through. Eldridge Hollow falls first, then more. The void swallows everything." Amara stood, pacing the small kitchen. The whispers grew louder, urging her back to the chapel, to the stone. But fear warred with anger at the pact, at the Watchers, at her mother's silence. "There must be a way to break it," she said. Eliza shook her head. "Many have tried. The book speaks of one who did, long ago, but the pages are torn. The knowledge is lost." That night, Amara lay awake, the book beside her bed. She pored over its pages by candlelight, trying to understand the strange language. Some words looked like English, twisted and old. Debt, void, seal. The drawings showed people kneeling at the altar, shadows looming over them, stars falling, like rain. One image chilled her, a figure with the mark, standing before a crack in the sky, darkness pouring out. The next day, Amara sought out Silas. He was the keeper of the chapel, the one who read from a similar book. Maybe he knew more. The town was hushed, the fog lifting to reveal a sky heavy with clouds. She found him in his small hut near the chapel, tending a fire. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "You again," he grumbled. "What do you want?" "The pact," Amara said bluntly. "Tell me about it." Silas froze, then laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Your mother finally told you, eh? About time." He gestured for her to sit on a worn stool. "The pact is old as the stones. The Watchers gave our ancestors this land, but nothing's free. Every 20 years, we pay. Your grandmother was the last." She refused, and the storms came, ships sank. Your mother ran, but the mark finds its own. Amara showed him her hand. Like this. Silas nodded, his face grim. The harbinger marked you. The shadow in the mist, it means the time is near. The full moon in 3 days. You must go to the chapel, touch the stone, say the words. What words? Amara pressed. Silas pulled out his own book, smaller than her mother's, and flipped to a page. Here, I bind my soul to the void. Payment for the light we hold. Amara memorized them, but they felt wrong on her tongue. Like poison. She left Silas, her mind swirling. The whispers approved, pulling her toward acceptance, but something in her rebelled. She wandered to the cliffs, where Caleb was mending nets. He looked up, surprise in his eyes. Amara, you look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, she said, sitting beside him. She told him everything, the whispers, the shadow, the pact. Caleb listened, his face piling. My PA told me stories, he admitted. Said his grandpa was chosen once, went to the chapel, and never came back the same. Hollow, like part of him was gone. Is there a way to stop it? Amara asked. Caleb thought, then nodded slowly. Pa mentioned alleged a stone from the sea, a counterseal, but it's dangerous. The watchers guard it. Hope sparked in Amara, where Caleb pointed to the waves crashing below. Down there, in the caves at low tide. But the mist hides them, and the shadows lurk. That night, under a sliver of moon, Amara climbed down the cliffs, a rope tied around her waist, a lantern in hand. The whispers screamed warnings, but she ignored them. The caves were dark mouths in the rock, water lapping at their edges. Inside, the air was damp, echoing with drips. She searched, her light casting long shadows. Then she saw it, a glint in the wall, a stone like the one in the chapel, but reversed. The eye closed. As she reached for it, the mist rolled in, thick and cold. The shadow appeared, its eyes glowing. Thief, it hissed in her mind. Amara grabbed the stone, pain shooting through her marked hand. The shadow lunged, its form wrapping around her like smoke. She felt the void pulling at her, stars blinking out, but she held on, whispering the words from the book backward. Hold, we light the 4 payment, void the 2 soul, my bind eye. The shadow shrieked, recoiling. The mist cleared, and Amara climbed back up, the counterstone warm in her pocket. But the mark on her hand hadn't faded. The pact was forgotten no more, but breaking it would cost more than she knew. Chapter 4. The hollow choir. Amara clutched the counterstone tightly as she scrambled up the cliffs, the sea's roar echoing in her ears like a warning. The small, smooth rock in her hand was heavy, not with weight but with a strange pull, as if it held a piece of the void itself. Its surface was etched with a closed eye. The opposite of the open-eyed symbol burned into her palm. The mark on her hand pulsed, its lines now creeping past her wrist, glowing faintly in the dark. The whispers, which had screamed when the shadow attacked, were quieter now but sharper, like needles pricking her thoughts. They urged her back to the chapel, but fear and defiance kept her moving toward home. The fog clung to Eldridge Hollow, wrapping the town in a shroud that muffled sound and blurred shapes. Amara's lantern flickered as she reached the cobblestone street, her boots slipping on the damp stones. Her house was dark, the windows like empty sockets, and she hesitated at the door, afraid her mother would see the counterstone and know what she'd done. Eliza's words about the pact tribute, the soul owed, hung heavy in Amara's mind. She didn't want to be chosen, didn't want to feed the watcher's hunger, but the mark and the whispers felt like chains pulling her toward a fate she couldn't escape. Inside, the kitchen was cold, the fire long dead. Eliza sat at the table, the book of pacts open before her, its pages lit by a single candle. Her face was pale, her eyes red, as if she'd been crying or hadn't slept. You went to the caves, she said, her voice flat but trembling at the edges. Amara froze, the counterstone hidden in her cloak pocket. How did you know? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eliza pointed to the book. It knows. The watchers see. You took something that doesn't belong to you. Amara pulled out the stone, holding it up. Its closed-eye symbol seemed to drink in the candlelight. This can stop it, can't it? Break the pact. Eliza's eyes widened, and she stood, knocking her chair back. You don't understand what you're doing, child. The counterstone is old, older than the chapel. It's not a key to freedom, it's a trap. The watchers guard it for a reason. Amara's heart sank, but she tightened her grip. Then why does it scare them? The shadow ran when I used it. Eliza shook her head, her hands wringing together. You pushed it back, yes, but you've drawn their attention. The Watchers don't just want a tribute now, they want you. The whispers surged in Amara's head, confirming her mother's words with a cruel hum. She sank into a chair, the counterstone heavy in her lap. There has to be a way, she said, her voice breaking. I won't give them my soul. Eliza sat beside her, her hand hovering over Amorous, but not touching, as if afraid of the mark. The book speaks of a ritual, she said softly, to seal the door without a tribute, but it's dangerous, and the words are incomplete. The counterstone is part of it, but there's more. A choir, a song to bind the void. The settlers called it the hollow choir. Amara's eyes flicked to the book. What's the hollow choir? Eliza turned the pages, stopping at a drawing of figures standing in a circle, their mouths open in silent screams, stars falling around them. The settlers sang to the Watchers, not with voices but with their will, their fear, their lives. The choir was their strength, but it broke them. The book says the last choir failed, and the void took half the town. Amara's stomach twisted. So we need a choir to use the counterstone. Eliza nodded. But no one in Eldridge Hollow will help. They're too afraid. They'd rather sacrifice you than risk the Watcher's wrath. Amara stood, anger flaring. Then I'll find my own choir. Caleb knows something. He mentioned the caves. Others must too. The next day, Amara sought Caleb at the docks, where the air smelled of fish and salt. The sea was restless, waves crashing higher than usual, as if stirred by something below. Caleb was mending a net, his hands quick, but his eyes darting to the horizon. You're back, he said, not looking at her. Thought you'd stay away after the cliffs. Amara showed him the counterstone, keeping it low so no one else saw. I found this. It's a way to fight the pact. But I need help. A choir, people to stand with me. Caleb's face paled, and he dropped the net. You're crazy, Amara. That stone's cursed. My pa said it drove his grandpa mad, made him see things, eyes in the sky, voices in the waves. Amara stepped closer. I've seen them too. The shadow, the void. If we don't stop it, it'll take me, then everyone. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. There's a few who might listen. Old Mara, the baker, she lost her son to the pact years ago. And Jonas, the blacksmith, he's quiet, but he hates the chapel. Amara spent the day gathering her choir. Mara was old, her hands gnarled, but her eyes burned with anger when Amara showed her the stone. They took my boy, she whispered. I'll sing your song, girl. Jonas was harder to convince, his face scarred from forge fires, his voice gruff. I don't trust stones or pacts, he said. But when Amara told him about the shadow, he agreed, muttering about debts unpaid. By nightfall, Amara had her choir herself, Caleb, Mara, and Jonas. They met at the cliffs, away from the town's prying eyes, the counterstone glowing faintly in her hand. The fog was thick again, the air heavy with the smell of salt, and something sour, like decay. Amara explained the ritual, piecing together what Eliza had told her, and what she'd gleaned from the book. We stand in a circle, hold the stone, and say the words backward, like I did in the cave. It's not a song with music, it's a will, a push against the void. They formed a circle, the sea crashing below, the mist swirling around them. Amara held the counterstone, its warmth spreading through her. She began the words, reversing the pact's chant. Hold, we light the forepayment, void the two-soul my bind I. Caleb joined, then Mara, their voices shaky, but growing stronger. Jonas was last, his deep voice rumbling like the sea. The whispers in Amara's head screamed, fighting back, and the mark on her hand burned, lines spreading to her forearm. The mist thickened, and shadows moved within it, not one, but many, their eyes glowing like stars. The choir faltered, Mara's voice breaking into a sob. Keep going, Amara shouted, her voice raw. The counterstone glowed brighter, its light cutting through the fog. The shadows pressed closer, their forms twisting, mouths opening to reveal teeth like broken glass. The air buzzed, the ground trembling, as if the cliffs themselves were waking. Amara's vision blurred, and she saw the void againless, hungry, with eyes that weren't eyes but holes into nothing. The choir's voices grew hollow, echoing in her mind like a song from a dead world. She felt her strength draining, as if the stone was pulling her life into it. Caleb grabbed her hand, his grip tight. Don't stop, he yelled. They chanted, louder, the words a shield against the shadows. The mist parted, and for a moment the shadows retreated. The counterstone blazed, its light white-hot. Amara felt a snap, like a rope breaking, and the whispers went silent. The mark on her hand faded slightly, the lines retreating to her palm. The choir collapsed, panting, their faces pale. The fog was gone, the night clear, the stars above, too bright, too close. But the victory was short. As they climbed back to the town, Amara saw lights in the chapel, green and cold. Silas stood at the door, his eyes locking onto hers. "You've angered them," he said, his voice like gravel. The choir was hollow. "The debt remains." Amara's heart sank. The counterstone was warm in her pocket, but the mark still burned. The pact was weakened, but not broken, and the watchers were watching closer now. Chapter 5. The Mark of the Unseen. The night after the ritual. Amara tossed in her bed, the counterstone under her pillow like a secret that burned. The mark on her hand had faded a bit after the choir's chant, but it still tingled, a reminder that the watchers weren't gone, just pushed back. The whispers were silent for the first time in days, but that silence felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. Eldridge Hollow slept under a clear sky, the stars too sharp, too many, as if the void had left its eyes hanging above the town. Amara finally drifted off, her dreams filled with shadows that watched but didn't touch, unseen hands pulling at threads she couldn't see. She woke to a scream not her own, but from outside. Dawn was breaking, grey light seeping through her window. She rushed downstairs, her bare feet cold on the floor, and found her mother at the door, staring out. "What is it?" Amara asked, her voice thick with sleep. Eliza pointed, her hand shaking. In the yard, the grass was dead in a perfect circle, the same size as the one the choir had formed on the cliffs, and in the center, etched into the earth, like a burn, was the eye symbol open, staring. Amara's hand throbbed, the mark flaring to life. She knelt in the dirt, touching the symbol, and felt a pull, like the stone in the chapel. "They know," Eliza whispered. "The watchers marked our home. The unseen are here." Amara stood, fear turning to resolve. The counterstone in her pocket warmed, but it wasn't enough. The ritual had weakened the pact, but the mark of the unseen was spreading, not just on her skin but into the town. That morning, Amara went to find her choir. The town was stirring, but the air felt heavy, eyes watching from behind curtains. Caleb was at the docks, his face pale as he hauled nets. "Did you see it?" Amara asked, showing him her hand. The lines had spread again, thin veins crawling toward her elbow. Caleb nodded, pulling up his sleeve. On his arm, a faint outline of the eye, barely visible but there. "Woke up with it. Hurts when I think about the chapel." Mara, the baker, had it on her neck, like a tattoo hidden under her collar. "It burns," she said, her voice trembling as she kneaded dough, "like fire under my skin." Jonas, the blacksmith, showed his palm, the mark bold and black. Hammer slipped. "Today," he grumbled. "Never happened before. It's their doing." The choir was marked, bound by the unseen forces they'd angered. The watchers hadn't retreated, they'd left their sign, a curse that tied them to the void. Amara gathered them in Mara's back room, the smell of bread mixing with fear. "The mark is spreading," she said, laying the counterstone on the table. It glowed softly, its closed eye a mocking contrast to their open ones. "We weakened the pact, but now they're fighting back. The unseen shadows we can't see are here, watching, waiting." Caleb leaned forward. "What do we do?" Amara thought of the book, the torn pages. "We need to find the full ritual. The book my mother has is missing parts. Maybe Silas knows more." They slipped through the town, avoiding the chapel hill where the air hummed like a warning. Silas was in his hut, the door ajar, a faint green light inside. He looked older, his eyes sunken. "You fools," he rasped when he saw them. The hollow choir woke the unseen. "Now the marks bind you." Amara showed her hand. "Tell us how to stop it." Silas laughed, a hollow sound. "The mark of the unseen isn't just skin deep. It's in your blood, your thoughts. The watchers use it to pull you into the void, piece by piece." He pulled out his book, flipping to a page with drawings of people, twisted, their bodies fading into shadows. "The unseen are the watchers' fingers in our world, ghosts of the void, marking those who defy. To remove it, you need the silent altar, but that's deeper in the chapel. Hidden." Amara's heart raced. "Hidden where?" Silas pointed to the symbol. "Under the stone you touched. but going there invites them fully. The group left, tension thick. That night, the marks burned hotter. Amara dreamed of unseen hands on her skin, pulling her apart. She woke sweating, the lines on her arm glowing. She heard noises outside, soft steps, whispers not in her head but in the wind. Peeking out, she saw nothing, but the dead grass circle had grown, creeping toward the house. The next day, strange things happened in town. A fisherman vanished at sea, his boat found empty, an eye carved into the wood. A child screamed about invisible eyes watching her play. The townsfolk whispered, blaming the strangers, Amara and her mother. Caleb came to her, his mark darker. "Jonas is gone," he said. "Went to his forge last night, didn't come back. Found his hammer with the mark burned in." Fear gripped Amara. The unseen were picking them off, using the marks to drag them into the void. She and Caleb went to Mara, who was shaking, her mark now on her face like a scar. "I feel them," she whispered. Pulling, they decided to go to the chapel that night, to find the hidden altar. The hill was dark, the chapel looming like a beast. Inside, the air was cold, the stone in the floor pulsing. Amara knelt, pressing the counterstone to it. The floor rumbled, a crack opening, revealing stairs down into blackness. "The endless corridor," Mara murmured, remembering Silas's words. They descended, lanterns flickering. The walls were carved with eyes, watching. The mark on Amara's arm guided her, burning brighter. At the bottom, a chamber, the silent altar, a slab of black stone with no symbols, just emptiness. Shadows moved, unseen but felt, brushing their skin. Amara placed the counterstone on the altar. "We have to chant again," she said. They formed a circle, voices low, reversing the words. The marks flared, pain shooting through them. The unseen attacked, cold touches, visions of the void, whispers promising peace if they stopped. Mara screamed, her body fading, pulled into shadow. Caleb grabbed her, but she was gone, a faint eye left on the floor. Amara pushed on, the counterstone cracking with power. The marks retreated slightly, the unseen recoiling, but as they climbed back, Amara knew it wasn't over. The mark was part of her now, unseen forces still lurking. The watchers were patient, and the debt grew. Chapter 6. The endless corridor. Amara's hand trembled as she gripped the cracked counterstone, its faint glow the only light in the dark chamber beneath the chapel. The silent altar loomed before her and Caleb, its black surface swallowing their lantern's light like a hungry mouth. Mara was gone, her scream still echoing in Amara's ears. Her body pulled into the void by the unseen, leaving only the eye symbol burned into the stone floor. The mark on Amara's arm pulsed, its lines now curling past her elbow, a map of pain tying her to the watchers. Caleb's mark was darker too, etched across his forearm, and his face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. The air buzzed with a wrongness that made their skin crawl, as if the chapel itself was alive and angry. "We can't stay here," Caleb whispered, his voice shaking. "They took Mara, they'll take us to..." Amara nodded, but the counterstone in her hand felt heavy, urging her deeper. The ritual at the silent altar had pushed back the unseen, but it hadn't broken the pact. The mark still burned, and the whispers, though faint, were creeping back, muttering about doors and debts. She looked at the crack in the floor where they'd descended, the stairs leading back to the chapel above. But behind the altar, another passage, yonder narrow tunnel, its walls carved with the same eye symbols, stretching into darkness. "The endless corridor," Amara said, remembering Silas's warning. He said the altar was only the start. "The real seal is deeper." Caleb shook his head, stepping back. "That's madness, Amara. We barely got out of here alive. Jonas is gone. Mara's gone. We're all that's left." But Amara's mark burned hotter, pulling her toward the tunnel. "We can't stop now," she said. "The counterstone worked, it hurt them. If we find the seal, we can end this." Caleb hesitated, then nodded, gripping his lantern tighter. They stepped into the corridor, the air growing colder with each step, the walls closing in until they could barely walk side by side. The eye carvings seemed to watch, their pupils glinting in the lantern light, as if alive. The whispers returned, not in Amara's head, but in the air, a low hum that vibrated in her bones. The corridor stretched on, longer than it should have. The chapel, above too small to hold such a place. The ground sloped down, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and something older, like decayed stars. Amara's mark guided her, flaring when she touched the walls, as if it knew the way. The counterstone glowed brighter, its closed eye symbol pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Caleb's breathing was ragged, his lantern shaking. "This place isn't right," he muttered. "It's like we're not in the world anymore." Amara felt it too. The corridor didn't follow the rules of space or time. The walls shimmered, showing glimpses of other places. A sea of black waves under a sky of blinking eyes. A field of stones that whispered her name. A void where shadows danced with teeth. They walked for what felt like hours, the corridor twisting, branching into paths that led nowhere, then looping back. Amara's legs ached, but the mark urged her on, a compass in her flesh. Finally, they reached a chamber, its walls covered in carvings, not just eyes now, but hands, mouths, spirals that seemed to move. In the center was a stone pillar, tall and smooth, with a slot shaped like the counterstone. Above it, the ceiling was gone, replaced by a swirling darkness, stars spinning in patterns that hurt to look at. "This is it," Amara said, her voice echoing. "The seal." She stepped forward, but Caleb grabbed her arm. "Wait, look." Around the pillar, shadows moved, not the unseen, but something worse. They were tall, thin, with too many limbs, their forms flickering like bad dreams. Their eyes glowed, not with light but with absence, holes that pulled at Amara's mind. The whispers surged, a chorus of voices. "Place it, seal it, pay it." Amara's hand shook as she held the counterstone. "We have to try," she said. Caleb nodded, his mark glowing too. They stepped toward the pillar, the shadows circling. Closer, Amara raised the stone, fitting it into the slot. It clicked, and the chamber shook, dust falling from the walls. The shadows screamed, a sound that wasn't sound but a tear in her mind. The mark on her arm burned white-hot, and she saw the void againless, hungry, with a presence so vast. It crushed her thoughts. The counterstone glowed, its light spreading, pushing the shadows back. But then it cracked further, a jagged line splitting the closed eye. The whispers changed, laughing now, mocking. "Not enough," they said. "The choir is broken. The debt is yours." Amara's vision swam, and she saw Caleb stumble, his mark spreading to his chest, his eyes wide with terror. The shadows lunged, wrapping around him like smoke. "Amara!" he screamed, then faded, his lantern clattering to the floor. The eye symbol burned where he'd stood. Amara fell to her knees, the counterstone slipping from her hand. The pillar's light dimmed, the shadows retreating, but not gone. She was alone now, the last of the choir, the mark covering half her arm. The corridor seemed to stretch further, the walls closing in, the eyes watching. She grabbed the counterstone, its warmth faint, and ran back the way they'd come. The whispers chasing her, promising pain, promising oblivion. She emerged in the chapel, the crack in the floor ceiling behind her. The dawn light filtered through the open door, but it felt wrong, too cold, too green. The town was quiet, but the dead grass circles had spread, covering yards, streets, even the cliffs. The mark of the unseen was everywhere, and Amara knew the watchers were closer than ever. She stumbled home, the counterstone heavy in her pocket. Eliza was waiting, her face a mask of grief. "Caleb?" she asked. Amara shook her head, tears falling. The corridor took him. The seal didn't work. Elisa pulled her close, the first hug in years. "The mark is stronger now," she whispered. "The unseen won't stop. You have to face the keeper next." Amara pulled back. "The keeper?" Eliza nodded, pointing to the book. "The keeper of the void. The one who guards the true door. Silas knows where to find it." Chapter 7. The keeper of the void. Amara staggered into her house. The counterstone clutched in her trembling hand, its cracked surface barely glowing now. The mark on her arm burned, its jagged lines stretching past her elbow, curling like tendrils. Toward her shoulder, Caleb's scream echoed in her mind, his body swallowed by the shadows in the endless corridor, leaving only the eye symbol seared into the stone floor. The weight of loss pressed on her chest. Mara, Jonas, Caleb, all gone, taken by the unseen. The Watcher's cruel fingers in the world. The whispers were back, faint but sharp, like a blade scraping bone, urging her to return to the chapel, to finish what she'd started. But fear rooted her to the kitchen, where Eliza stood, her face pale as moonlight, the book of pacts open on the table. "You saw the keeper, didn't you?" Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on Amara's marked arm. Amara shook her head, her throat tight. "No, just shadows. They took Caleb. The counterstone didn't work. She set the stone on the table, its closed eye, symbol, dull, fractured. Eliza's fingers hovered over it, not touching, as if it might burn. The keeper is deeper, she said. Beyond the corridor, guarding the true door. The counterstone was only a key, not the answer. Amara sank into a chair, exhaustion pulling at her like the tide. Who's the keeper? She asked, her voice raw. Eliza turned the book's brittle pages, stopping at a drawing of a figure cloaked in darkness, its face hidden, hands outstretched with eyes embedded in the palms. The keeper of the void, she said. Not human, not watcher, but something between. It binds the pact, holds the door shut, but it serves the watchers, and it's cruel. To break the pact, you must face it. Amara's heart pounded. Silas knows where it is, she said, remembering her mother's words. But he won't help. He's part of this. Eliza nodded, her eyes shadowed. Silas is bound to the chapel, like your grandmother was. He's been keeper's servant since he was young, reading the book to keep the town in line. But he's afraid to. You can use that. The day dragged on, grey and heavy, the town eerily quiet. Dead grass. Circles had spread etching eye symbols into yards and streets, as if the watchers were claiming Eldridge Hollow piece by piece. The townsfolk stayed inside, their whispers of strangers and curses audible through cracked windows. Amara felt their stares, even indoors, the mark on her arm a beacon for the unseen. She couldn't eat, couldn't rest. The whispers, growing louder, promising peace if she surrendered, pain if she fought. By dusk, Amara made up her mind. She wrapped the counterstone in a cloth, tucked it into her cloak, and headed for Silas's hut. The hill loomed, the chapel's black stones glowing faintly under the setting sun, like a beast waiting to swallow her. Silas was outside, tending a small fire, his bent form casting a long shadow. He looked up as she approached, his eyes narrowing. "You're stubborn, girl," he rasped. "The void's got its claws in you, and you still fight." "Tell me about the keeper," Amara said, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing her insides. She showed him the counterstone. "It's crack. Wider now. This got me to the corridor. Where's the true door?" Silas's face twitched, his hands tightening on his cane. "You don't know what you're asking. The keeper doesn't bargain. It takes. Then why are you so scared?" Amara snapped, stepping closer. "You're tied to it, aren't you? Like my grandmother. Tell me, or I'll drag you to the chapel myself." Silas flinched, his eyes darting to the hill. For a moment, he looked small, frail, not the stern voice of the chapel, but a man trapped by secrets. "The door's beyond the corridor," he said finally, "a chamber of stars. The keeper waits there, holding the pact's heart. But the mark you're already half its." Amara's arm burned, the lines glowing through her sleeve. "How do I fight it?" Silas shook his head. "You don't. The counterstone might open the door, but the keeper decides who leaves, and it never lets go." He turned away, muttering, "Go home, girl. The full moon's tomorrow. Your time's up." Amara didn't go home. She couldn't. The mark was spreading, the whispers louder, and the town was unraveling. Another fisherman missing, a house with its door carved with eyes, a child weeping about shadows in her dreams. She returned to her mother, who was pacing, the book clutched to her chest. "I'm going back," Amara said. "Tonight?" Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. Instead, she pressed a small knife into Amara's hand, its blade etched with a closed eye symbol. "It's old," she said. "From before the pact, it might help." Under the cover of night, Amara climbed the hill alone. The fog thickened, cold, the seas roared distant but angry. The chapel door was open, a green glow spilling out. Inside, the stone in the floor pulsed, the crack still there from her last visit. She pressed the counterstone to it, and the floor rumbled, splitting, wider to reveal the stairs. The endless corridor waited below, its walls alive with eyes that blinked in the lantern light. Amara descended, the knife in one hand, the counterstone in the other. The corridor felt different now, colder, the air thick with a hum that made her teeth ached. The walls twisted, showing glimpses of the void stars that weren't stars, hands reaching from darkness, mouths whispering her name. The mark guided her, burning brighter, leading her deeper than before. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The corridor warped time, stretching it like taffy. Finally, she reached a new chamber, vast and wrong, its walls shimmering like liquid night. Above, A ceiling of stars swirled, not in patterns but in chaos, each one an eye watching her. In the center stood a figure, the keeper of the void. It was tall, cloaked in shadow, its face hidden except for glowing eyes, and its hands, raised toward her. The whispers became a scream. You come, you pay, you stay. Amara held up the counterstone, its light weak but steady. I'm here to break the pact, she said, her voice shaking. The keeper laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and the mark on her arm flared, pulling her forward. The knife burned in her hand, its symbol glowing. She lunged, stabbing at the keeper, but it moved like smoke, its eyes blinding her. The void opened in her mind, a hunger that wanted her soul, her light, her everything. She pressed the counterstone to the floor, where a faint outline of a door glowed. The keeper shrieked, its form solidifying, claws reaching. Amara slashed with the knife, cutting shadow, and the counterstone shattered, its light exploding. The chamber shook, stars falling like rain, and the keeper retreated, wounded but not gone. Amara collapsed, the mark now on her chest, the whispers promising more. She crawled back to the chapel, the knife lost, the counterstone dust. The town was silent, but the eyes were everywhere. The keeper was waiting, and the pact was still alive. Chapter 8. The Silent Altar. In the small town of Eldridge, hidden deep in the misty hills of New England, stood an old church that no one dared to visit after dark. The townfolks whispered about it in low voices, their eyes darting around as if the shadows themselves might listen. Eldridge was a place where time seemed to crawl, where the trees grew twisted and the fog never fully lifted. The church, with its tall spire piercing the grey sky like a forgotten needle, had been there longer than anyone could remember. Its stones were black with age, covered in vines that looked like veins pulsing with some hidden life. My name is Elias Thorne, and I grew up in Eldridge, the son of a fisherman who vanished at sea when I was just a boy. My mother raised me alone, telling stories of the old days when the town was full of life. But those stories always ended with warnings about the church on the hill, the silent altar, they called it. No bells rang from its tower, no songs echoed from its halls. It was said that, long ago, people went there to pray, but something answered their calls in ways that drove them mad. I was 23 when I first felt the pull of that place. It started on a cold autumn evening, the kind where the wind howls like a lonely wolf. I had been working at the local mill, grinding flour until my hands ached and my back screamed for rest. The other workers talked little, their faces lined with worry. Rumors had spread through town like wildfire, strange lights in the sky at night, flickering like distant stars falling to earth. Fishermen reported seeing shapes in the water, vast and hungry, lurking just below the waves. That night, as I walked home along the dirt path, the fog rolled in thicker than usual. It wrapped around my legs like cold fingers, making each step feel heavy. My house was a small cottage at the edge of town, with a thatched roof and windows that rattled in the wind. Mother was waiting by the fire, her knitting needles clicking like tiny bones. "Elias," she said, her voice thin and tired, "stay away from the hill tonight. The stars are wrong." I laughed it off, though a chill ran down my spine. Stars are just stars, Ma, nothing more. But deep down, I knew she was right. The night sky over Eldridge had always felt alive, watching us with eyes we couldn't see. As a child, I would lie in bed and stare out the window, counting the twinkling lights until sleep took me. Lately, though, new patterns appeared, strange clusters that didn't match any map I'd seen in the old books at the town library. After supper, a simple meal of bread and stew. I couldn't shake the restlessness. Mother went to bed early, her prayers muttered under her breath. I sat by the window, pipe in hand, puffing smoke that curled like ghosts. The moon was full, casting a pale glow over the landscape. In the distance, the church spire loomed, black against the silver light. Something called to me, a whisper in my mind that wasn't quite a voice. I grabbed my lantern and coat, slipping out into the night. The path to the church was overgrown, weeds snagging at my boots. Owls hooted from the trees, their calls echoing strangely, as if the sound bounced off invisible walls. The air grew colder the higher I climbed, and the fog thickened until I could barely see my hand in front of my face. When I reached the churchyard, the gate creaked open on its own, rusty hinges groaning like a dying man. Graves dotted the ground, their stones tilted and worn, names faded by time. I held the lantern high, its flame dancing wildly. The church doors were massive, made of dark wood, carved with symbols I didn't recognize, whorls, and lines that twisted into shapes like eyes and mouths. Pushing the doors open, I stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with dust and something else, a faint smell like rotten earth. No pews filled the space. Instead, the floor sloped down to a central pit, where a large stone altar stood silent and alone. It was smooth, polished black, with no markings except for faint grooves that ran like rivers across its surface. I approached slowly, my boots echoing in the vast emptiness. The lantern light played tricks, making shadows leap and twist on the walls. High above, the ceiling was vaulted, painted with faded murals of stars and comets streaking across a night sky. But these weren't ordinary stars. They formed faces, agonized and screaming, as if the heavens themselves were in pain. A sudden gust of wind slammed the doors shut behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. The flame in my lantern flickered but didn't go out. "Hello," I called. My voice swallowed. By the silence, no answer came, but I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. Kneeling by the altar, I ran my fingers over its surface. It was cold, unnaturally so, like touching ice in the dead of winter. Whispers started then, faint at first, like wind through cracks. They grew louder, words I couldn't understand, ancient and full of sorrow. The air hummed with energy, vibrating in my bones. I stood up quickly, backing away. That's when I saw eat a small book tucked into a niche in the wall, bound in leather. That looked like human skin. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The pages were yellowed, filled with handwriting that slanted wildly, as if written in haste. The title on the cover read, "The Echoes of the Lost." Flipping through, I read snippets. By lantern light, it spoke of travelers from beyond the stars, beings who came to Earth long ago, hungry for something we couldn't give. They built altars like this one, places where the veil between worlds thinned. The lost ones, it said, were those who heard their calls and answered, only to vanish into the void. A noise from outside made me jump, the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. I shoved the book into my coat and doused the lantern, plunging the church into darkness. Hiding behind a pillar, I peered out a cracked window. Figures moved in the fog, hooded and silent, circling the graveyard. They carried torches that burned with a blue flame, unnatural and cold. One of them stopped at a grave, digging with shovels that gleamed in the moonlight. They unearthed something, a box, small and ornate. Opening it, they pulled out what looked like a crystal, pulsing with inner light. The leader, taller than the others, held it up to the sky and chanted words that made my head ache. The stars above seemed to respond. They brightened, shifting positions as if alive. A shooting star streaked across the sky, but it didn't fade. It grew closer, a ball of fire hurtling toward the earth. The figures scattered as it crashed into the woods. Nearby, shaking the ground, I waited until they were gone, then slipped out of the church, heart racing. The path back felt longer, the fog denser. Whispers followed me, echoing in my ears. The hunger, the veil, ... At home, I barred the door and lit every candle. Mother was still asleep, unaware. I pulled out the book and read more, my eyes burning from the strain. It told of a great hunger beneath the world, a force that fed on prayers and dreams. The silent altar was a gate, it said, where the lost could return if the right words were spoken. Sleep didn't come that night. Visions plagued me, vast spaces between stars, filled with writhing shapes that hungered for light. When dawn broke, pale and weak, I hid the book under my bed and went to work as if nothing had happened. But the town felt different. People avoided my gaze, whispering behind hands. At the mill, old man Hargrove pulled me aside. "You were up at the church last night, weren't you, boy?" His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "How did you know?" I asked, fear gripping my chest. "The stars told me," he replied, laughing madly before turning away. Days passed in a blur. The strange lights in the sky grew brighter, and more fishermen went missing. Their boats found empty, drifting with nets torn to shreds. I dreamed of the altar every night, its surface calling me back. The book became my obsession. I read it in secret, learning of the veil of stars, a barrier that kept the outer ones at bay. But it was weakening, torn by the echoes of the lost. One evening, as rain pounded the roof, a knock came at the door. Mother answered, her face pulling. It was Reverend Blackwood. the town's only preacher, though he never held services at the silent church. Elias, he said, stepping inside without invitation. We need to talk. He was a tall man, gaunt, with hollow cheeks, his eyes like deep wells. You've found the book, haven't you? The Echoes of the Lost. I nodded, too scared to lie. What is it? What's happening to this town? He sat by the fire, steepling his fingers. Long ago, before Eldridge was built, wanderers from the stars came here. They were not like oozefast minds in forms we can't comprehend. They sought worship, building altars to draw power from our fears and hopes. But something went wrong. The hunger beneath awoke, a force older than time, buried deep in the earth. Mother gasped, clutching her shawl. The final prayer, she whispered. Reverend Blackwood nodded. Yes, the lost ones tried to seal it away with a prayer, but it only delayed the end. Now, the veil thins, and the stars align. If we don't act, the hunger will rise and consume us all. What can we do? I asked, my voice trembling. He must return to the altar, he said. Face the echoes. Only then can we begin to mend the veil. That night, under a sky heavy with clouds, I set out again. The book was in my pocket, its weight a constant reminder. The path was slick with rain, mud sucking at my boots. Lightning flashed, illuminating the church like a skeleton in the dark. Inside, the altar waited, silent as ever. I placed the book on it and spoke the words I'd memorized, ancient phrases that twisted my tongue. The air grew thick, charged with electricity. Whispers rose, louder now, forming names and pleas from the lost. Visions flooded my mind, cities in the stars, crumbling under the weight of endless night. Beings of light devoured by shadows from below. Prayers echoing into void, unanswered except by hunger. The ground trembled. Cracks appeared in the floor, revealing darkness that pulsed like a heart. Something stirred beneath, vast and ravenous. Reaching up with tendrils of shadow, I backed away, but the doors wouldn't open. The altar glowed, its grooves filling with light from above. Stars pierced the ceiling, as if it weren't there, beaming down like spears. The final prayer, I muttered, recalling the book's last page. Kneeling, I recited it, words pouring out in a rush. The whispers screamed, then faded. The trembling stopped, the cracked ceiling, but as silence returned, I knew it was only the beginning. The hunger beneath slept again, but the veil of stars was torn, and the echoes of the lost still called. Exhausted, I stumbled home through the storm. Mother waited, eyes filled with worry. It's not over, I told her. She nodded. No, my son, the cosmic dance has just begun. The next days brought more strangeness. Birds fell from the sky, dead with eyes wide in terror. The sea turned black, waves crashing with foam like blood. Townfolks gathered in whispers, forming groups to watch the hill. Reverend Blackwood came often, teaching me more from hidden texts. The outer ones watch, he said. They wait for the alignment, when the veil lifts fully. I studied the stars each night, mapping their shifts. New constellations formed shapes, of beasts and altars, pointing to Eldridge like accusatory fingers. One afternoon, while walking the beach, I found a washed-up relic stone carved with the same symbols as the church doors. It hummed in my hand, warm despite the cold wind. Pocketing it, I felt a surge of knowledge, compressed into flashes, memories of ancient rites, sacrifices to sat the hunger. That night, dreams took me deeper. I floated in space, among swirling galaxies, hearing the cries of worlds devoured. A voice, vast and empty, spoke, "We are the lost. Join us in the final prayer." Waking in sweat, I knew I had to return to the altar. Alone this time, under a moonless sky. The church doors opened easily, welcoming. The altar pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Placing the stone on it, I watched as light erupted, filling the room. Shadows danced, forming figures, ghosts of the lost. Their faces twisted in agony. They spoke in unison. The hunger beneath stirs. The veil of stars cracks. Only the silent altar holds the key. Visions assaulted me. Eons ago, a comet brought the outer ones, crashing into the hill. They built the church over the crater, sealing the hunger with prayers. But humans, curious, poked at the veil, letting echoes through. One ghost stepped forward, a woman in old clothes. "I was the first," she said. "I prayed for my lost child, and it answered with madness." Others joined, sailors taken by the sea, miners swallowed by earth, all drawn to the altar's call. "The final prayer is not to seal," they chorused. but to feed. Horror gripped me. The book lied or hid the truth. The prayer didn't stop the hunger. It appeased it, offering souls in exchange for peace. I fled, leaving the stone behind. Outside, the sky swirled with colors not of this world, purples and greens twisting like serpents. Town was in chaos. People screamed, pointing upward. Lights descended, hovering over the hill. Reverend Blackwood found me. "What have you done?" "I learned the truth," I gasped. "We can't stop it. We can only delay." He smiled sadly. "That's the Gothic curse of our world, Elias. Beauty in horror, light in dark. The cosmic vastness dwarfs us, yet we fight. Together, we returned. The altar now cracked, ooze seeping from bellow black and sticky, smelling of decay. We chanted the prayer, voices blending with echoes. The hunger receded, but at a cost. I felt part of me slip away, lost to the void. As dawn broke, the sky cleared, but I knew chapter 1 was just the start. The echoes lingered, the veil thinned, the hunger waited. Chapter 9. The whispering void. That dawn after my night at the silent altar felt like a lie. The sky was too calm, a soft pink streaking over Eldridge's hills, as if the world hadn't nearly cracked open hours before. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cold tea, staring at the leather-bound book I'd stolen from the church. The echoes of the lost. Its pages seemed to hum, daring me to open it again. Mother shuffled in, her shawl tight around her shoulders. Eyes, read from sleepless worry. "You look like death, Elias," she said, voice sharp but trembling. "What happened up there?" I didn't answer. How could I explain the ghosts, the oozing cracks, the stars that moved like living things? Reverend Blackwood's words echoed. In my head, the cosmic vastness dwarfs us, yet we fight. Fight what? A hunger that ate souls. A veil that kept the world from unraveling. I pushed the mug away and stood. "I need to see the Reverend." Mother grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Stay away from that church, boy. It's cursed. Always has been." Her eyes flicked to the book on the table, and she froze, like she recognized it. "Where did you get that?" "Found it," I lied, avoiding her gaze. "It's just a book." "It's no such thing," she snapped, but her voice cracked, and she let go, turning away. "Do what you must, but don't bring that evil into this house." I tucked the book into my coat and left, the morning air biting my face. Eldridge was waking, but the town felt wrong to quiet, like a held breath. Fishermen didn't head to the docks. Instead, they gathered in knots, whispering about the black waves and the lights in the sky. Old women clutched rosaries, muttering prayers that sounded more like pleas. Even the dogs were silent, tails tucked as they slunk through alleys. The Reverend lived in a small house near the town square, its windows boarded up like it was hiding from the world. I knocked, and the door opened before my fist hit twice. Blackwood stood there, his gaunt face paler than yesterday, eyes like pits of shadow. "You felt it, didn't you?" he said, pulling me inside. The hunger stirred. I nodded, words stuck in my throat. His house smelled of old paper and wax, shelves crammed with books and strange artifacts, bones, stones, a jar of glowing liquid that pulsed faintly. He sat me down at a cluttered table and poured tea, though his hands shook. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. The altar's glow, the ghosts' voices, the prayer that pushed the hunger back, but took a piece of me with it. I showed him the book, and he flinched, like I'd held up a snake. "You shouldn't have taken it," he said, but his fingers traced the cover with a kind of reverence. "This is older than Eldridge, older than the church. It's a record of the lost ones, those who faced the outer ones and paid the price." "What are they?" I asked, leaning forward. "The outer ones. The book talks about travelers from the stars, but it's all riddles." Blackwood sighed, rubbing his temples. "They're not like us, Elias, not flesh, not spirit, but something else. Means vast as oceans, forms that shift like smoke. Long ago, they came to earth, drawn by our prayers, our dreams. They built altars to feed on them, to grow stronger. But something went wrong. The hunger beneath woke, a force even they feared. They sealed it with the veil of stars, but it's never truly slept." I thought of the black ooze, the cracks in the church floor. "And now it's waking again." "Yes," he said, voice low. "The stars are aligning, thinning the veil. The echoes of the lost are growing louder, calling to us. If we don't act, the hunger will break free, and Eldridge, maybe the world will be consumed." "What do we do?" I asked, my chest tight. The prayer worked, but it felt wrong, like I was feeding it something. Blackwood's eyes darkened. The final prayer isn't a cure, it's a bargain. It gives the hunger a taste to keep it quiet, but each time it takes more pieces of us, our souls, our memories. That's why the lost ones haunt the altar. They gave too much. I stood, pacing the small room. Then why keep praying? Why not destroy the altar, burn the church down? He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You think others haven't tried. The altar is older than stone, older than fire. It's tied to the earth, to the stars. Break it, and you might tear the veil wide open. I stopped, staring at a carved stone on his shelf, similar to the one I'd found on the beach. What about these? I pulled the stone from my pocket, its warmth pulsing against my palm. I found it by the sea. It showed me things, memories. Maybe Blackwood took it, turning it over in his hands. A star shard, he whispered. Fragments of the comet that brought the outer ones. They hold echoes of their power, their knowledge. Dangerous, but useful. Keep it close, it might guide you. Guide me to what? I asked, frustration bubbling up. I don't even know what I'm fighting for. For survival, he said simply. For Eldridge, for the world. The hunger beneath doesn't care about good or evil. It just wants. We have to hold the veil together until the stars shift again. He handed me a map, old and brittle, drawn in ink that shimmered like oil. It showed Eldridge, the church marked with a symbol like an eye. Lines radiated out, connecting to other pointscaves, cliffs, a lake deep in the woods. The altar isn't alone, he said. There are other places, other seals. The outer ones built a network to keep the hunger bound. If we strengthen them, we might buy time. I studied the map, my heart sinking. And if we fail? He didn't answer, just pointed to a spot on the map, a cave in the northern hills. Start here, tonight. Take the book and the shard. You'll know what to do. I left his house with the map folded in my pocket, the shard's warmth a constant pulse against my leg. The town felt smaller, the air heavier, like it was pressing down on me. At the mill, work was slow. Half the workers hadn't shown up, and those who did whispered about dreams of drowning in stars. I kept my head down, but Hargrove caught my eye, grinning like he knew my secrets. Heard the whispers. Yet boy, he said, then laughed and walked away. By dusk, I was ready. I packed a baglantern knife, the book, the shard, and a flask of water. Mother was at the table, knitting furiously, refusing to look at me. You're going back, she said, not a question. I have to, I said. Something's coming. Ma, I can't just sit here. She stood, grabbing my shoulders. You're all I have, Elias. Your father went to the sea, chasing whispers. Don't let the hill take you to. I hugged her, promising I'd return, though I wasn't sure I could keep it. The northern hills were a good hour's walk, through woods where the trees leaned like they were listening. The map led to a cave hidden behind a tangle of roots, its entrance a black maw that swallowed my lantern's light. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of moss and something metallic, like blood. The walls were smooth, carved with the same swirling symbols as the church doors. My boots crunched on loose stones, and the shard in my pocket grew warmer, almost burning. I followed the tunnel down, the whispers starting again soft at first, then louder, like a crowd murmuring just out of sight. The tunnel opened into a chamber, vast and domed, its ceiling glittering with crystals that caught the lantern light like stars. In the center stood another altar, smaller than the church's but just as black, its surface rippling like water. I approached the shard, now so hot I had to wrap it in cloth. The book felt heavy, its pages fluttering without wind. I opened it, reading by lantern light. The words were clearer here, as if the cave sharpened their meaning. It spoke of the second seal, a lock to hold the hunger's dreams at bay. The outer ones had carved these caves to trap the echoes, to keep the lost ones from wandering too far. But the seals were weakening, the dreams leaking out. I placed the shard on the altar, and the crystals above flared, bathing the chamber in blue light. Shadows moved, forming shapes, people, animals, things that weren't either. They circled me, whispering names, dates, lives lost to the hunger. A fisherman, eyes wide with terror, spoke of a sea that wasn't water but void. A woman, her dress torn, begged for her child, stolen by the stars. I found the prayer in the book, different from the church's but just as heavy. I spoke it, my voice shaking. The altar pulsed, the crystals dimmed, and the shadows screamed, fading into silence. The shard cooled, its light gone. I felt lighter, but hollow, like another piece of me had been taken. Outside, the night was still, the stars too bright, too close. I stumbled back to town, the map crumpled in my hand. Reverend Blackwood was waiting at my door, his face grim. "You did it," he said. "The second seal holds for now." "How many more?" I asked, exhausted. "3, he said. "The lake, the cliff, the grove, each one harder, each one hungrier." I nodded, too tired to argue. Inside, Mother was asleep, the fire low. I hid the book and shard under my bed, but sleep didn't come. Dreams bled into waking visions of a sky torn open, shapes pouring through, vast and writhing. The hunger beneath laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Days passed, and Eldridge grew stranger. The sea stayed black, fish washing up dead, their bellies split open. Birds vanished, replaced by eerie silence. People stopped going out at night, barring their doors. Hargrove disappeared, his house empty except for a single page torn from a book, scribbled with stars. I studied the map, plotting the next seal. Lake, Blackwood warned it was deeper, older, tied to the outer one's first arrival. The shard began to glow again, faintly, like it knew what was coming. One night, as thunder rumbled, I set out. The lake was hidden in a valley, its waters still and black, reflecting no stars. The air was thick, buzzing like a swarm of bees. I found a stone circle by the shore, each rock carved with symbols that glowed faintly green. The book described a ritual, not just a prayer. Blood was needed, a drop, maybe more. I pricked my finger with my knife, letting red drip onto the altar stone in the circle's center. The lake rippled, waves moving against the wind. Whispers rose, louder, angrier, speaking of betrayal, of promises broken by the outer ones. A figure emerged from the water, not human, not solid, but a shape of light and shadow. Eyes like burning coals. "You call us," it said, voice echoing. "In my skull, you feed the hunger." "I'm trying to stop it," I said, gripping the shard. It laughed, a sound that made my ears bleed. "You cannot stop what is eternal." The veil phrase, the lost return. Join them, or be consumed. I recited the ritual, blood mixing with words. The figure screamed, dissolving into mist. The lake stilled, the glow faded. But as I left, I saw my reflection in the water-mired face, but older, eyes hollow, like the ghosts. Back home, I collapsed, the shard cold again. Blackwood came at dawn, his face lined with new wrinkles. "2 seals down," he said, "but the hunger knows you now. It'll fight harder." I didn't ask what was next. The map burned in my pocket, the cliff and grove waiting. The stars above shifted, forming new shapes a hand, a mouth, a door. The town was unraveling. Houses stood empty, their owners gone, or hiding. The church spire seemed taller, its shadow stretching across Eldridge like a warning. Mother stopped speaking, her eyes distant, as if she heard the whispers too. I dreamed of the void, a place where stars screamed and the hunger sang. Each night, I woke with less of myself, pieces slipping away to the altar, the lake, the cave. The shard glowed brighter, guiding me to the next seal. But I feared what I'd become when it was over. The cliff was next, a jagged scar overlooking the sea. I went alone, the book heavy, the shard burning. The wind howled, carrying voices my father's, calling from the waves. The seal was a stone arch, carved with faces that wept black tears. I spoke the prayer, blood dripping again. The arch glowed, the sea roared, and shadows rose, sailors, lost to the hunger, their mouths open in silent screams. They reached for me, but the shard flared, driving them back. The seal held, but the cost was heavy. I felt my memories frame my father's face, my childhood, fading like old ink. I stumbled home, the world blurring. Blackwood was waiting. "One more," he said. "The grove, the final seal." I nodded, too empty to speak. The hunger beneath stirred, its laughter louder. The veil of stars was thin as gossamer, and the echoes of the lost screamed my name. Chapter 10. The veil of stars. The weight of the past weeks clung to me like damp fog as I prepared to face the final seal. Eldridge was a ghost town now, its streets empty, windows dark, the air thick with unspoken fear. The black waves still crashed against the shore, spitting foam that looked like ash. My mother hadn't spoken in days, her eyes fixed on the horizon, as if waiting for my father to rise from the sea. The shard in my pocket burned hotter each night, its glow seeping through my coat like a warning. The book, the echoes of the lost, felt alive, its pages rustling even when untouched, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Reverend Blackwood came to our cottage at dawn, his face carved with worry, his hands clutching a bundle of papers, yellowed by time. "The Grove," he said, spreading the papers on the table. They were maps, sketches, fragments of prayers, all pointing to a place deep in the woods where the final seal waited. "It's the heart of the network, Elias, the strongest, but also the hungriest. If you fail there, the veil of stars will tear, and the hunger beneath will rise." I studied the maps, my fingers tracing paths through tangled trees to a clearing marked with a spiral. "What's in the grove?" I asked, my voice rough from sleepless nights. Blackwood hesitated, his eyes darting to the book. "The outer one's first altar, not like the church, not like the cave or lake. It's raw, ancient, a wound in the earth where they spoke to the hunger directly. The final prayer isn't just words, it's a sacrifice." My stomach twisted. "Sacrifice, like blood." "More than blood," he said, voice low. "The hunger wants life, will, memory. The lost ones gave everything to seal it. You'll need to give something to—" I thought of the pieces I'd already lost, memories of my father's laugh, the smell of my mother's bread, the boy I used to be. Each seal had taken a bite, leaving me hollow. "What if I don't have enough left?" I asked. Blackwood's gaze softened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a small vial of dark liquid. "Drink this before you go. It'll sharpen your mind, keep the whispers at bay. But it won't last long." I tucked the vial away, next to the shard and the book. The grove was a half-day's trek, through woods where the air grew colder and the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches like fingers brushing my shoulders. I set out at noon, the sky heavy with clouds that swirled in patterns like the symbols on the church doors. The shard pulsed, guiding me, its heat a steady rhythm against my leg. The woods were silent, no birds, no wind, just my boots crunching on dead leaves. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, shapes that vanished when I turned. The whispers were constant now, not just in my head, but in the air, weaving through the trees like threads of smoke. They spoke of loss, of hunger, of stars that burned. With hate by dusk, I reached the grove. It was a perfect circle, ringed by trees, so old, their roots twisted above the ground like frozen snakes. In the center stood a stone, not an altar but a slab, rough and jagged, stained with dark patches that glistened wetly, despite no rain. The air hummed, thick with a pressure that made my ears pop. The shard glowed bright, its light casting long shadows that danced like they were alive. I opened the book, its pages flipping to a passage I hadn't seen before. The words were sharp, jagged, like they were carved into the paper. They described the final sealer ritual to bind the hunger, to strengthen the veil of stars. But the cost was clear. One must stand where the lost stood, give what they gave. No details, just that ominous line. I drank Blackwood's vial, the liquid bitter, burning my throat. My mind cleared, the whispers fading to a dull hum. I stepped to the slab, placing the shard in a hollow at its center. The ground trembled, and the trees groaned, their branches bending inward. Light erupted from the shard, shooting upward, connecting to the stars above. The clouds parted, revealing a sky alive with movement, constellations twisting, forming a vast eye that stared down. The whispers returned, louder, angrier. Shadows rose from the ground, not just figures but masses, writhing like the things I'd seen in my dreams. They weren't human, not any more, limbs too long, faces melting into mouths that gaped without sound. "Join us," they hissed, their voices a chorus of pain. "Feed the hunger, become the lost." I gripped the book, my hands shaking, and began the ritual. The words were heavy, each one pulling at my chest like a hook. The slab glowed, its stains spreading, pooling into shapes that mirrored the stars above. The air grew thick, hard to breathe, like I was underwater. My memories flashed my mother's smile, my father's boat fading into fog, the boy who used to climb trees without fear. They slipped away, one by one, swallowed by the slab. A figure appeared, not a shadow, but solid, draped in a cloak that shimmered like starlight. Its face was hidden, but its eyes burned, twin points of fire. "You call us," it said, voice like a storm trapped in a bottle. "You tear the veil. I'm trying to save it." I shouted, the words ripping from my throat. Tell me, how to stop the hunger. It laughed, a sound that shook the trees. The hunger is eternal. The veil is a lie, a bandage on a wound that never heals. You delay, you feed, but you cannot stop. I kept chanting, the ritual's words burning my tongue. The shard flared brighter, the slab cracking under its light. The figure reached for me, its hand cold as space, brushing my chest. Pain exploded, like my heart was being pulled out. I saw flashes, worlds burning, stars collapsing, creatures vast as mountains crawling through voids. The outer ones, not gods but parasites, feeding on prayers across eons. I stumbled, blood dripping from my nose. The ritual was nearly done, but each word cost more. My childhood was gone, my mother's face a blur. I saw her in the grove, or thought I did, standing among the shadows, her eyes empty. Elias, she whispered, or maybe it was the wind. The figure spoke again. Give yourself, and the seal holds. Refuse, and the veil falls. I thought of Eldridge, its empty streets, the fishermen lost to the sea, the children who'd never grow up if the hunger rose. I thought of my father, maybe one of the lost, trapped in the void. Take it, I said, voice breaking. Take what you need. The slab erupted in light, blinding, searing. The figure vanished, the shadows screamed, and the ground shook so hard I fell to my knees. The shard shattered, its pieces scattering like dust. The stars above stilled, the eye fading, the veil holding for now. I don't know how I got home. The woods blurred, my legs moving on their own. When I stumbled into the cottage, Mother was gone. The fire was cold, her shawl on the floor. Panic gripped me, but my mind was too foggy to hold it. I collapsed, the book falling open beside me. Blackwood found me at dawn, his face grim. You did it, he said, helping me up. The grove is sealed. The hunger sleeps. For how long? I asked, my voice a rasp. He didn't answer, just handed me a new map, smaller, with a single marker tower on the coast, half ruined, older than the church. The outer ones left more than altars, he said. There's a watchpost, a place, to guard the veil. You're tied to it now. Elias, the hunger knows your name. I looked at the book, its pages blank now, as if the words had burned away. The shard was gone, but I felt its warmth still, buried in my chest. My memories were fragments, Mother's voice, a laugh, a storm at sea. I didn't know what was mine anymore. The town was quieter, the sea less black, but the fear lingered. People returned to their routines, but their eyes avoided mine. Hargrove reappeared, grinning like nothing had happened, though his hands shook when he passed me at the mill. I went to the tower the next night, unable to resist the pull. It stood on a cliff, crumbling stone wrapped in ivy, its top open too. The sky, inside, a spiral stair led to a platform where a crystal hung, suspended in air, glowing faintly. It hummed when I touched it, showing me flashes, other towns, other altars, other watchers like me, all fighting to hold the veil. The stars above were wrong again, shifting into new shapes, claw, a heart, a gate. The whispers were faint but there, promising more seals, more sacrifices. I understood now. The hunger beneath never stopped, and neither could I. The veil of stars was fragile, a threadbare curtain against the void. The lost ones watched, their echoes my only company. I stood on the tower, the wind cold against my face, and spoke a new prayer, not from the book, but from the hollow place inside me. The crystal glowed brighter, the stars steadied, and for a moment the world felt whole. But as I descended, I heard it a laugh from below, deep in the earth, patient and endless. The hunger waited, and I was its keeper now. Chapter 11. The hunger beneath the tower on the cliff became my second home in the weeks that followed. Its stone walls, cold and unyielding, echoed with the faint hum of the crystal that hung in the air, watching over the veil of stars like a weary eye. Eldridge tried to heal people, returned to their routines. Fishermen cast nets into a sea that slowly turned blue again. Children laughed in the streets, but the scars remained. Whispers lingered in corners. Shadows stretched too long at dusk, and I felt the hunger beneath stirring, a distant rumble like thunder far below the earth. I was changed. The sacrifices at the seals had carved me hollow, leaving echoes where memories should be. My mother's face was a blur, her voice a faint murmur in dreams. Reverend Blackwood visited often, his steps slower, his eyes shadowed by what he knew but wouldn't say. "You're the watcher now, Elias," he'd tell me, handing over scraps of old texts. "The outer ones chose you, or the hunger did. Keep the crystal bright, and the veil holds." But the crystal dimmed each night, its glow fading like a dying fire. I spent hours staring into it, seeing flashes of other places, distant lands, with crumbling altars, watchers, like me, fighting alone. The hunger wasn't just under Eldridge, it stretched beneath the world, a vast network of roots feeding on fears and forgotten prayers. The book was blank, its knowledge burned into my mind, compressed into visions that hit like storms, ancient battles where stars fell like rain, outer ones fleeing from the maw that opened below. One evening, as fog rolled in from the sea, the crystal pulsed red, a warning. The tower shook, dust sifting from the ceiling. I rushed to the platform, the wind howling through cracks. The stars above swirled, forming a spiral that pointed down, straight at the town. Whispers rose, not from the air but from inside me deep, rumbling, hungry. "Feed," they said, "or break." I grabbed my lantern and coat, racing down the spiral. Stairs, the path to town was slick with mist, trees clawing at the sky. Lights flickered in windows, but screams echoed from the square. People gathered, pointing at the ground where cracks had appeared, black lines snaking through the dirt like veins. Old Hargrove was there, laughing madly, his eyes wild. "It's waking," he shouted. "The hunger beneath calls." Blackwood pushed through the crowd, grabbing my arm. "The seals are failing," he hissed. "The grove was the last, but something's tearing them open. We have to go below." "Below," I echoed, fear gripping my gut. He nodded, leading me to the church, the silent altar. The doors were ajar, wind moaning through like a cry. Inside, the main altar was cracked wide, a jagged hole yawning into darkness. Stairs spiraled down, carved from stone that gleamed wetly. "The hunger's lair," Blackwood said, lighting a torch. "The outer ones sealed it, but echoes of the lost have weakened the bonds." We descended, the air growing thick, heavy with a smell like wet earth and decay. The walls were alive, pulsing faintly, covered in carvings that shifted when I blinked. Faces, stars, mouths gaping wide. The whispers were louder here, a roar in my ears, speaking of endless void, of feasts on worlds long gone. The stairs ended in a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, floor a sea of black stone rippled like frozen waves. In the center, a pit gaped, edges glowing with faint light. From it came the hunger's breath, cold, pulling at my clothes, my skin. Blackwood held up his torch, revealing tendrils of shadow coiling up from the pit, testing the air. "This is where it feeds," he said, voice trembling. "The prayers from above trickle down, sating it, but now it wants more real flesh, real souls." A tendril lashed out, wrapping around his leg. He screamed as it pulled him toward the pit. I lunged, grabbing his arm, but the shadow was strong, cold as ice. "Run," he yelled, but I held on, reciting words from the book's echoes, a chant to bind, to push back. The tendril recoiled. Dropping him, he gasped, leg burned black. "You have their power now," he said, awe in his eyes. "The outer ones touch." We circled the pit, the hunger rumbling below, a sound like grinding rocks. Visions hit me, the outer ones arriving on a comet, crashing into this spot, waking the ancient force buried deep. They built the church above to seal it, but curiosity, human prayers cracked the door. Shadows rose, forming shapes, the lost ones, twisted and hungry. They lunged, mouths wide, but I spoke the chant again, the crystal's light echoing in my mind. They faded, but the pit widened, cracks spreading. "We need to seal it from inside," Blackwood said, pointing to a ledge around the pit. "Walk the rim, speak the final words, but it'll take everything." I nodded, stepping onto the ledge. The pit pulled, a void that whispered promises, peace, forgetfulness, fullness. I walked, words pouring out, each step heavier. Memories flooded, back then vanished. My father's last wave, mother's tears, my own reflection in the lake. Halfway around, the hunger surged, a wave of shadow crashing up. It engulfed me, pulling me down. Darkness swallowed everything, cold, endless, filled with screams. I floated in the void, stars winking out around me. The hunger spoke, not in words but feelings, eternal emptiness, a need that burned like fire. I fought, clinging to the chant, the crystal's glow a spark in my chest. Light flared, pushing back the dark. I climbed, tendrils snapping at my heels, emerging on the ledge gasping. The pit shrank, cracks sealing, but Blackwood was gone, pulled in during the surge. His torch lay flickering. Alone, I stumbled up the stairs, the church silent once more. Outside, the cracks in the square had closed, people dispersing, fear easing. But I knew the truth. The hunger beneath slept, but its dreams leaked through, poisoning the world. Days blurred. I returned to the tower, the crystal brighter but fragile. New visions came, other watchers falling, their seals breaking. The veil thinned daily, stars falling like tears. One night, a stranger arrived, a woman, cloaked eyes like the void. "You're not alone," she said. "There are others, fighting the same war." She showed me a map, vast, covering lands I'd never seen. The hunger spreads. We must unite the watchers, mend the veil before the final alignment. I agreed, packing the blank book, now refilling with new words. We set out at dawn, the sea calm, the sky clear, but below, the rumble lingered, patient. The journey took us, through forgotten paths, to ruins where altars stood cracked. We met watchers, old men, young girls, all hollow like me. Each shared stories, prayers that summoned shadows, stars that devoured villages. At a mountain seal, we fought tendrils that burst from the ground, chanting together to bind them. The hunger roared, but our voices drowned it. Yet with each victory, I felt it grow, a pull from below, the whispers promising release. The woman, Mira, noticed. "Don't give in," she said. "The lost ones did, and now they serve it." We reached a great chasm. The map's center, a pit larger than Eldridge, ringed by stones. "The source," Mira said, "where the outer ones first woke it." Shadows swarmed, the hunger's full might. We chanted, lights flaring from our hands. "The outer ones, gift." The pit trembled, closing inch by inch, but in the end, it demanded a price. Myra stepped forward, eyes calm. "Take me," she said, vanishing into the dark. The seal held, the rumble fading. Alone again, I wandered back, the map heavier. Eldridge welcomed me like a stranger. The tower waited, crystal dim. I climbed, speaking prayers to the stars, holding the veil one more night. But deep down, I knew, the hunger beneath never dies. It waits, and one day, it will feed.